2022. I want to remind everybody that this meeting is being recorded. I thank you all for coming. I will hand this over to our Vice Chair, Lee Strickland, who will take over from me for the meeting. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. I'm Lee Strickland, Vice Chairman of Cipo, and I'd like to welcome everybody to the annual general meeting. I'm not sure, well, I know we don't have a quorum. I might just say something about that. This meeting it's being recorded. We're going to present it as if we had a quorum. We are going to, unfortunately, not vote on things at the moment because we have some issues on the bylaws. We noticed in the past that a quorum is actually about 450 people. We've never had that. So what we're doing is recording the meeting, taking notes. We're presenting everything so that all our members are fully aware of what's going on, what's happening. But you'll notice on the agenda when we get to it, I think does that be the next slide? Is that number 3, the agenda? Yeah, there we go. We are going to have a review of at least talk about the change in the bylaws and why it happened, but we're trying to get the bylaws to reflect how we do our business. So we thought that was important to spend some time on that. You see the agenda in front of you now, and not that we're going to approve it, but that's what we're going to do unless somebody has some additional items they'd like to bring up. And if you do, please raise your hand and we'll see if we can get it addressed, or maybe even cover it during questions and answers at the end of the program. But we've done number 1. We're on to approval agenda, which we cannot officially do. I'll talk about how we're going to get around that when we get to the bylaws, which is item number 5. 2021 minutes. Again, I think they were all sent out to all the membership, and we had the same problem last year. We did not have a quorum, so the meeting was rather abbreviated, and I think that was sent out to you earlier today. Brett is going to present the 2021 financials. We're going to talk about the bylaws and how that's being handled. Whitney will talk about the Cipo strategic plan and as a result of that, our brand and design process. We're going to review the board members, which are slate of officers for this year. And again, the slate is out there. We cannot officially approve that, but we are going to move forward, and I'll explain how that's going to happen. And number 9, any other business from anyone that has some things to add to this agenda, you're welcome to do it. And I think that when we get to that point, number 9 is when we'll add things to it. And once we get through that, we'll adjourn. So we'll go to the next slide, please. And let's see, 2021 minutes. Do we have, I don't think there's anything to bring up on that. I did talk about that the minutes were sent out to all the membership. It is rather abbreviated. And if you have any questions, we can bring that up during the Q&A at the end of the meeting today. Okay, I'm going to turn it over to Brent, who is going to review the 2021 financials. Brent.
Perfect. Thank you, Lee, and welcome everybody to our AGM. Thanks for joining us. And so 2021 financials. So keep that in mind as we go through this conversation. Again, we're not voting on anything. I'm just presenting them to you. And even though we're a little bit later in 2022, these are the 2021 financials. So next slide, please. So there's a few slides here that present revenue figures on a couple of slides, and then most of the slides will kind of give a high overview of some of the expenses that Cipo had in 2021. I'm not going to go into any specific detail in them because the slides are actually fairly detailed in what they present. So there's nothing really lumped into anything as a lump sum. They're fairly broken out in terms of detail. What I will do is remind everybody that Cipo's fiscal year does run a calendar year. So that's January to December. And in keeping with the new kind of regulations that govern non-for-profits in Ontario, which is where Cipo is incorporated, Cipo underwent its first ever official audit last year. We've done financial reviews in the past. They're not quite as detailed or thorough as an audit. They do provide a level of assurance, but an audit is now mandated by the Government of Ontario for not-for-profits. And so we underwent our first official audit. Grant Thornton were our auditors. Again, they're the ones who we've worked with in the past, and they provided us with audited financials. Long story short, they gave us a clean bill of health. They did not find any issues with our financial reporting for 2021. And you know, everything was kind of as expected. When you deal with a small not-for-profit, you do have certain risks and challenges that present themselves, and they made note of that. And I think none of it would be any surprise to anybody in that, you know, our streams of funding are rather small and limited. So, you know, that would present a risk should one of our funders decide on any given year maybe not to fund us. And so we'd have to go through some steps to try to fill that hole if that were to happen. One of the other bigger risks that I think is highlighted for everyone these days is COVID, which of course you never know how it's going to impact things, whether it be staffing, finances, logistics, supplies. It seems like it's touched everything. So those were the two main challenges or potential risks for the organization that were highlighted by the auditors. But again, that did not factor into giving a negative review or audit. It was simply a flag that they are obligated to flag as auditors that these are possible risks. We can go to the next slide, please. And so here we're going to start to look at some expenses. And again, I'm not going to go into any details because they're fairly self-explanatory. If you could just maybe flip through a couple of extra slides here, Whitney, please, just to have a quick glance at things there. And maybe we'll stop there for a moment, actually. And so kind of getting back to the audit, when it comes to revenue, we had some fantastic partners that obviously we've had some longstanding relationships with. They've provided us with most of our funding. We have started to grow beyond that too in terms of holding fundraising events. And so this year we held the Walk for PI, which actually did very well for its inaugural year and raised some decent funds that we're hoping continues to grow next year. And we're looking at kind of expanding some activities in the coming years as well that will perhaps make us a little bit less reliant on some corporate sponsors and pharma sponsors, and just kind of continue to grow awareness as part of fundraising as well. Now, a benefit of going through an audit too that you wouldn't necessarily get just by kind of looking at things at a really high level are that your auditors give you some suggestions or recommendations on how you might make efficiencies, improve workflows, kind of tighten up your own internal controls. And we had looked at some of those items as an organization as well, even before the audit, to say, hey, is there something that we need to do just to make sure you know, that everything is happening the way it should we get additional approvals and so on. And so when we spoke with the auditors about this, we were really on the same page. And as an example of some of these kind of efficiencies, what I'll call them, there are things like moving away from check writing and getting more into electronic payments through the bank. And it's just easier to audit. There's a better paper trail, better authorization trail, things like kind of separation of duties in the accounting world. So it's not necessarily ideal to have someone who is entering a bill, for example, in an accounting system to also be the one in charge of marking it as paid. Auditors, you know, it's not a huge flag for them, especially when you're a small organization like Cipo, but it's always kind of listed as something that you could improve. The more arm's length people are from each and every transaction, the better, just from a control perspective. So you'll see things as we move into 2022 and 2023, which we're kind of in 2022 now for the fiscal, just to kind of give some forward-looking statements. You'll see some changes happening that we'll point out this time next year when we do our AGM again. And some of those changes will be a move toward external bookkeeping and payroll administration, really embracing more electronic payments through the bank as opposed to manual payments through checks, kind of ramping up more monthly reporting to the board as opposed to just quarterly when we meet as a board. And then also potentially adding in to the finance committee some risk assessments. So kind of taking that overall look at things similar to how the auditors pointed out COVID as a risk or funding potentially as a risk, taking that on in a more internal role and kind of evaluating what those risks mean and how can we start to brainstorm ways to mitigate those risks should something happen. So just some changes coming down the road that I thought I would point out here now because we'll present on them in more detail this time next year. So figured this would be kind of a good way to springboard into that conversation for next year. So we can go to the next slide, and it's again, more expenses, just kind of wrapping up that conversation a little bit for 2021. Things, there was nothing completely out of line with prior years. We made a bit of an office move in 2021 now. So we do have a more physical office presence again. So there was rent included in there. And then next slide 2, please. And then that's kind of our wrap up for the year. So nothing extremely unexpected at all in terms of year over year comparison for financials even. And again, the audit came back quite clean with no concerns for 2021. I believe that's the last finance slide. So I can either open it up for questions now, or Lee, I can leave it up to you if you want questions more at the end of the program.
Brett, we can probably leave it over for questions now.
Sure.
I'd just like to, my understanding for general accounting practice rules is that since this is our first year, we've conducted an audited statement. It's not fully audited because the beginning of the year was not audited from the year before. Is that correct?
It's a good point. So 2021 was fully audited. What they do, since 2020 did not get audited, wasn't required to be audited, is they quickly go through and do a high level review of 2020 so that they can have some consistency for comparison year over year. So in a way, when you do your first audit, you kind of get like 1.5 audits, so to speak, in one. So yeah, so there's a little bit of if you were to look at 2020 to 2021, it's not necessarily exactly apples to apples comparison. It's apples to oranges, but it's pretty close. So you do have a little bit of a comparison issue for your first audit. So that's a good point to keep in mind if people review the financials, that 2020 was not audited, 2021 was, and the auditors take a high level view of both years to make sure that they're as smooth and consistent as can be, but they don't do a deep dive on the immediate prior year for the opening balances and so on. So it's a good point.
So are there any other questions from the membership? Anybody? Okay, if none, we're going to go to the next item, which is proposed bylaws. Now, most of the board members have been really involved in this thing for quite some time. I think it's going on maybe a year and a half. And we finally came to a conclusion that we're going to follow the standard organizational bylaws for nonprofit organizations, which is as suggested by the Ontario government, which is where we are registered as a corporation. So we've made some modifications, basically ones regarding the quorum. So we're saying the quorum is, I can't remember how it's written, but we will not be faced every year with not having a quorum. In fact, this will guarantee that every year we will have a quorum and we can move through and make decisions, approve financial statements, et cetera, which we should be doing. And the new bylaws will provide for that. I think they were all sent out to the bylaws were just actually sent out today It's quite lengthy. If you need to fall asleep some night, you're welcome to read them. But they are, I think, very, very good. We spent a lot of time on them and believe that we have the bylaws written the way they should be so that we can properly conduct our business. So going forward, we have to send our bylaws to the I can't remember what ministry it is, but Ministry of Not-Profit Corporations or something, to review our bylaws, because they can provide a mechanism to approve our new bylaws without having to go through the process of trying to get a quorum ourselves and getting approved, which would never happen. So once that is done, and we believe that since we pretty much followed their guidelines for the bylaws, that we will get approval on that. Then after that, we'll decide what we need to do to actually legitimize past decisions or movement that has been made in prior years. And once that's done, from here on, everything will be pretty much on the up and up. It always has been. It's just that we have conducted our business technically a little bit in violation of bylaws because we just cannot get the quorum that's required by the old bylaws. And I don't think anybody ever, when the bylaws were originally written, anticipated that would be a problem, but it has been. But I think the new bylaws are very good. As I said, we spent a lot of time looking at them, making sure that they suit to what we're doing. And we feel we're going to be very good going forward. So are there any questions at this time on the bylaws? I think that's the next, might be questions. Next slide. So you're welcome to contact us at any time if you do have some questions regarding the bylaws or concerns. But I believe they are going to be very good and helpful for the corporation moving forward. So next item, going to turn it over to Whitney. She's going to talk about our strategic plan and what that was involved. That'll be an overview. And we are also going through rebranding of Cipo, and she will cover that over the next few slides as well. So Whitney, I'll turn it over to you.
Thanks, Lee. Hi, everyone. So as Lee mentioned, Cipo underwent, the board underwent strategic planning this year. Cipo's last strategic plan was in 2017. So that was 3 to 5 years strategic planning, and 2022 was the timing for new strategic planning session. So in January of 2022, the board and the staff, we used a consulting company to come in and work with us to make some new strategic planning for the organization. And I believe this has all been posted and sent out to the membership as well in June. So we're just going to kind of go over the high level issues and what we've kind of come up with. So we worked from January through to June in the strategic planning sessions, but in just to kind of go over briefly, but we we adopted a new mission, vision, and values for the organization, which we felt better reflected who we are and who we serve and what the organization does. So the new mission for the organization is we empower Canadians impacted by immune deficiency disorders to live well through education, support, advocacy, community building, and research. And while these are things that we've been doing, we felt very strongly that the community building and research, which hadn't been reflected in our previous mission, were very important components of our organization and should be reflected in our mission. And our vision is now all Canadians with immunodeficiency disorders have access to the resources they need to thrive. And we believe that as an organization, and we stand by that. And that really is what it's all about and what we will be working for and towards. And our values are community, equity, inclusiveness, empowerment, excellence, and innovation. And we will be using those values across everything we do and who we are. And how we will be doing all of this and how we will be achieving both our mission and our vision is through 4 pillars. And those pillars are programs with measurable impact, equitable access through advocacy, a growing inclusive community, and operational strength and sustainability. So operational strength and sustainability is internal. It's really helping us to continue to be here and working for the community. But the other 3 I will talk about a little bit more. So programs with measurable impact. The importance of this one is really that our programs and services are there not because we believe they're needed, but because we can show that the community has a need and a want for them by using evaluation and measures to see that they're wanted and needed, not just because we believe they are. And that we will have an evidence-based approach, and we will continue to measure and evaluate as we are, even throughout the program cycle. So we'll continue as we launch a program or we're running a program or a service, we'll monitor throughout and change and develop as we're going and reassess continually. And then, monitor at the end of the program, feedback, and reevaluate and debrief continuously and see how we're doing. And we have to work with our community and with our members the whole time. It's a very inclusive process, but I think that's something that's really important. Advocacy has always been a big part of who we are, but we need to increase awareness continually. Equitable access is something that's very important across the country. So that is still going to be a big pillar of who we are. The PI patient registry is very important for our community, and that data is very important. So that pillar is going to be, again, its own strong pillar. And community is going to be, as you'll see as well going forward, something that's a strong pillar for us. We want to grow this community. We want it to be inclusive across Canada, across demographics. We have heard, we did a survey of our membership, and we want people to know that we've heard you, and we want to be servicing our membership the best we can in that inclusive way. Are there any questions in regards to our strategic plan? We have the strategic plan on our website, and we're happy to send it out. The full plan, this is more of a high-level overview to anyone who would like to see that. All right, well, with that, I'm going to launch into something that came out of the strategic plan, is a very exciting rebrand. So out of the strategic plan, when we were working, we had to look internally about Cipo and who we are and who we serve. And there's a lot of confusion. I know there's a lot of confusion about who we are, even just the name, Cipo, CIPO. The Canadian Intellectual Properties Office is something when you Google us, we're way down the list. Even within our community, there's confusion about how you pronounce our name. You tell someone who we are and they forget us very quickly, because the Canadian Immunodeficiencies Patient Organization is a huge mouthful and it's very hard to remember. And so it was a want for something simple and easy and recognizable, and something that you can tell someone and they won't forget it. Or it's something that you can take to government when you're advocating. We were talking about that advocacy pillar, when you can walk into a doctor's office or a minister's office and they will remember who you are. So the rebranding was quite important for us. We went through a survey process. We put surveys out to our membership. We put surveys out to our committees. We did, our steering committees took part, our board took part, our medical science advisory committees took part. We asked our membership to take part in this process. There was a series of interviews as well, one-on-one interviews with certain people who, well, members who came forward and said, yes, I want to take part in this process. And then we hired a marketing company to help with this process, the rebranding. And they set up meetings and interviews as well, and focus groups, and did one-on-one interviews with members. And this process, this interviews and meetings, it really went across our stakeholders. So we had people take part, members take part, all ages, healthcare providers, parents, patients. We really, staff members, board members, committee members, really felt like a good kind of subsection, cross-section from our stakeholders were heard in this process. We had a lot to consider as well. We had to kind of look at, we already had our new strategic plan in place at this point. We had to look at, you know, and keep in mind our new mission, our new vision, our values, our goals, and ensure that the rebrand really stayed solid and true to where we wanted to be. We had to make sure that our new branding was easy. We had to make sure that it could be pronounced by everybody. It could be memorable. It could grow with us as an organization. We didn't want something that in 10 years felt out of place or out of date, and that was easy to spell. And we wanted something that wouldn't be confused, for example, with the Canadian Intellectual Property Office, and that people would know that it was us. We also wanted something that was available. We needed something that was, I think one of our board members right away said, we want something that's not another corporate name or somebody else doesn't have it. We need something that's going to be available across social media. We need something that's going to be available for domain registrations. So we needed to play that carefully as well. So there was a lot to consider here too. And here it is. So we're really happy to introduce that Cipo is now Immunity Canada. So this is something really exciting for us. We want the focus on unity and being part of that community. So I'm going to explain a little bit behind Immunity Canada. Why Immunity Canada? So Immunity Canada speaks directly to our cause. Canada, obviously, people we serve, the values of our community, inclusiveness, empowerment. Given that primary immunodeficiency disorders are rare, it can be difficult to create meaningful change for individual disorders. When we work together in unity, our voices are louder and we are better able to advocate for our members and ourselves. And the logo, I'm going to talk a little bit about the visual logo that we just saw. The inspiration behind it, the orange squiggle that you just saw, we were looking and talking about a lot of words were flown. They had hundreds of people kind of give impact and words and kind of adjectives about how you feel being part of an immune deficiency. So we were thinking about our DNA, the feeling of being, how this organization can make you feel like you're really supported and being wrapped in support. And there was the patient journey came up a lot, and what that's like, the ups and downs of a patient journey. And then also we want to feel about the regulation of a nervous system and making it feel like we're actually going to be okay. The orange color was for providing emotional strength and warmth, and it's uplifting and is often used to symbolize optimism. Purple is the color people most often associate with individualism and ambiguity. And diseases and symptoms within the PI community are rare. Like the color and individual, they are shrouded in ambiguity. So again, here is our new logo and our new name, Immunity Canada. I'm really excited, and I hope you are as well. This is starting now, although the rollout will be kind of over the next few months. The new website will be launched this week, and we're really excited. And our new social media will be launched as well today.
Thank you, Whitney. That was a great presentation. I'm impressed. Are there questions from anybody else that's in the presence of the meeting today would have on this? One question I have on the website, I know a lot of people probably have the old Cipo access. Will it be, in case somebody tries to find us, will it redirect them to Immunity Canada?
It's going to be up for a while still. The old website will be up for a while, and then it will redirect once the new website's a kind of a soft launch for right now, until it's completed. It's available. It has some information on it. It'll have our events and some pages on it, but it's not completely finished yet. It's just a soft launch. But it is, when it's up and running, I think it's going to be up on Monday, and it'll be immunitycanada.org.
Okay. Thank you. Any other questions?
But if you do,
sorry.
if you do write immunitycanada.ca or immunitycanada.com, you'll be redirected to immunitycanada.org.
Okay. All right. Any other questions from anyone in attendance? Pretty quiet today.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's move on to the next slide. It's the last item, and the slate of board members that we have. The first 7 on there are current members, and all have consented to continue on the board, which I'm very happy about, because I think we've got now an extremely great board. And I'd also like to welcome Andrea. I'll let her pronounce her entire name, but we know her as, we'll know her as Andrea for short. And we welcome her to the board. She's going to be attending the board meetings, again, technically because of the bylaws, until we get that straightened out. She won't be an official board member, but she will be participating and learning about the organization going forward from this point forward. So welcome to Andrea. Question, are there any other people who would like to be nominated or suggest as far as a slate of members? We're always welcome to have good people on this board. So if you do consider that, please make it known to probably Christine, myself, anybody on the board, Whitney, you'd be interested. But I think that probably would not happen until next year, I think. Is that right, Whitney? Any additions other than this slate right here of the 8 that's here? Okay, would be next year. Okay, next slide, which is, I believe, any other business. So I'm going to open it up again to the floor. If anybody has anything to add to our agenda, any comments, we're welcome to hear from everyone. So all right, if there doesn't appear to be any. Whitney, you're not seeing any hands being raised at all. So in conclusion, I want to thank everybody for attending today. Appreciate the time. It wasn't a long meeting, a little bit more than a half an hour. Hopefully next year it will be in person and maybe a hybrid with virtual participation for those that can't attend. Is that, I think, the intent, Whitney, going forward? I think everybody's getting tired of these Zoom meetings, and although they work well, it's great to see a face and shake a hand and get to know someone in person. And so we'll look forward to that next year. So if there is no other business, I will just note that this meeting is adjourned, and thank you all for attending. See you next year. And I see Colin, thank you to everyone. Thank you for all your hard work. It's
Thanks,
fun.
everybody.
It's fun.
All right. And I'm going to stop the recording.
Mm-hmm.
And if the board members can jump on